All right, 20 past the hour. Joining us now on set, NBC News Chief White House correspondent and political director and host of the Daily Rundown, Chuck Todd. Good to have you with us.
Good Friday morning. Nice to be here.
And Melody Barnes back with us as well with solutions. And from Capitol Hill, speaking of solutions, Senator Elizabeth Warren. Very good to have you on board this morning, Senator.
Oh, good to be here. Good to be here.
I understand you're pushing a new bipartisan piece of legislation that you say will prevent future banking crises. We want to talk about that and hear if you think that's even possible, given the landscape in Washington. But I first want to get a sense of how you're doing, because Melody and I both know you. Her words to describe you are earnest, balanced, so common sense, practical. I can't imagine you fit. What are you doing in Washington? How's that going for you?
You know, I actually like it, because I'll tell you, I came here to work on certain things, and I came here to fight for hardworking families, and you come here, you get a chance to do that. And that really is good. There are a lot of tools in the toolbox here in Washington. You know, there are hearings and getting agencies to do what they should be doing, and getting to introduce legislation like the legislation that Senator McCain and Senator Cantwell and Senator King and I introduced last night. Let me put it this way. Look, my alternative is to throw a shoe at the television set when I get frustrated. At least when I come here, I can actually work on legislation. I can work on trying to make a difference. And I like that.
That's one way to look at it. We tend to throw shoes, so that's true. All right, so let's get to the bill here that you would like to separate traditional banks from financial service institutions that deal in investment banking, swaps, hedge funds, and private equity. Also separate deposit institutions from new products like derivatives. Explain all that, how this would work, and also why hasn't it happened already?
Yeah, well, it actually did happen already. It happened in 1933 after the Great Depression, when we separated what's called commercial banking, that's your checking account and savings account, the part that has FDIC insurance, from all of the risk-taking activities, you know, the gambling that takes place on Wall Street. And we built a big wall between those two, and it worked for nearly 50 years. It was solid. We didn't have a lot of trouble with the banks. We got rid of this kind of boom and bust cycle in the banking industry, and we built a good, strong middle class. But the banks wanted those profits you get from the high-risk gambling, and the high-risk gambling wanted access to the money in those checking accounts and in those deposit accounts. And so they kept hammering on Washington, come on, change it, change it, change it. The regulators started opening up loopholes in that act. And then finally, in 1999, Congress just got rid of what was left of the old Glass Steagall law. So we hit the crisis in 2008, and now Senator McCain, Senator Cantwell, Senator King, and I are saying, let's do this again. Let's put a good, strong Glass Steagall in place. Now, it's a 21st century view of it, because you've got to close up some loopholes that the regulators open, and you've got to account for some new fancy things that got invented after the original Glass Steagall was passed. But it's the same basic principle. If you want to take risks, do it on Wall Street, do it somewhere else without deposit money that's insured by the federal government. Banking should be boring. That's what it's about.
It should be boring. So I have Chuck Todd here with me, NBC's political director. It sounds so sensible. Is the senator's heart going to be broken? It sounds bipartisan. It sounds like it could potentially happen.
No, I think it's an impressive, smart group of four people pushing this. I mean, so I'm impressed with the three co-sponsors you got on this politically. I mean, this is the way to get something off the ground. Senator, I am curious to get your take as to why this didn't happen in Dodd-Frank, right? And I know, look, there's always been a lot of behind-the-scene reporting. Why didn't the White House push this? Why didn't Geithner do it? Why didn't the role Larry Summers may or may not have played, both in '99 as Treasury Secretary, when he testified on the Hill in favor of the repeal, and then why didn't this get included in Dodd-Frank?
You've got to be looking at that, right?
You do, but do remember, when we adopted Dodd-Frank in 2010, there were a whole lot of moving parts. And there were people who said, Look, we're putting a lot of new restrictions in place on the financial institutions. Let's get started. Let's get these underway. The problem we've got right now is that, you remember in 2008, part of what people talked about is there's too much concentration in the banking industry. That's part of the reason that the whole system was at risk and we ended up with too big to fail. Since then, the biggest four financial institutions are 30% bigger than they were. So I'm going to put it back to you this way. We have tried some pieces that have wound some of the risk out of the system. Okay, fine. Nobody has to go back and point any fingers about it. It's just that now we need to do some more because it's not enough.
So given that, Joe, I think you probably agree that banks are bigger than ever, and the facts that the senator is bringing to the table are correct. What is the possibility, though, that this sees the light of day, given the pace of things and the tone of things in Washington right now?
Well, that's the question I was going to ask the senator. Senator, so who's the opposition going to be? I think most of us around this table have lamented the fact that too big to fail has gotten even bigger. We ran a campaign in 2012. The only presidential candidate I heard talking about breaking up the banks in a serious way was John Huntsman. So there wasn't a lot of courage shown out there on the campaign trail in 2012. What about in the Senate? Who's going to be opposing this common sense solution?
Well, look, I'm going to start it by saying you do what you think is right. You get out there and propose what we should be proposing. Nobody has to oppose it if you won't get out there and fight for it in the first place. So at least by getting out there with Senator McCain and Senator Cantwell and Senator King, somebody's going to have to stand up and oppose it, rather than that just being, the state of play. But remember, Joe, people said we never get a Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. They said that's just not possible. The banks are going to oppose it. It'll never happen. At the end of the day, we got that agency, and it's a good, strong, tough agency. The way I look at this, you don't get anything if you don't fight for it. So I want to get out there. I'm going to fight for it. And look who I've got for a partner. I got John McCain for a partner. Could you ask for a better fighter? We've got Angus King. We've got Senator Cantwell. We're ready to fight. And if people want to defend letting the banks get bigger, letting them continue to take on risks and threaten the economy, then let them make that defense. But we got to have that fight if we're going to make any kind of change at all.
Hey, Senator, can you just put it in terms of, for the average viewer, if this becomes law, what does Wells Fargo? This is a bank that a lot of people, it's on the corners in many suburbs here in America. What does Wells Fargo look like after this bill, should it pass and be signed into law?
Basically, it looks just the same. If you've got a checking account there or if you've got passbook savings there, what looks different is how much risk there is in the overall banking system.
So they don't what is it? They do not do investments anymore? They're sort of prevented from doing Wall Street, or do they have to set up a separate firm, essentially?
They effectively will likely break apart so that there will be the old boring banking, the part we like, the part we see on our street corners, and there will still be the part that goes out and makes all the investments and takes all the risk. The only difference is when they take those risks, they can't get access to your savings account money. They can't get access to your checking account money. And that's how we think it should be. Both of those activities can occur, just not together in the same big financial institution.
Senator, thank you so much. We greatly appreciate it, and good luck.
Thank you.
Mika, Chuck asked a very good question. Consumers are going to want to know how this impacts them. I will tell you, I'll say it right here, I'm a Bank of America customer. I love Bank of America. And, I don't want any of that to change, obviously, but I think we're just talking about draining risk from a lot of the banks.
Listen, I'm all for it, and I think it should have been done a while ago. I understand why it hasn't, and it's not all good reasons, and I'm glad Elizabeth Warren is there. I'll be very transparent about that. We want to thank the senator for being on the show with us this morning.